Hi folks and welcome back to another video. My name is Shah and this is Thoroughly Enjoyed Books. And today you are watching my Women's Prize for Fiction Longlist predictions. The Women's Prize for Fiction is one of my favourite literary prizes and the longlist will be announced on the 5th of March, which is only next week. And I just thought it would be fun to come here and predict some of the books. I try and read as much of the Women's Prize longlisted and shortlisted books as I can. Last year I didn't like any of them except Wandering Souls, but I was also in a really big reading slump, so I'm not sure if that affected it. I just wasn't interested in a lot of them. But this year I have seen so many amazing books by women on YouTube that I'm convinced this is going to be one of the best years of the Women's Prize ever. I've also seen who the judges are, so I'm really excited about what books they're going to choose. I have got 3 categories of books that I'm going to talk about. I've only read 3 of my predictions. I don't even actually think some of them will make it. It's only because I've seen so many other people put them on their predictions and talk about them that I've thought maybe I should just add them. And since it's all for fun, that's absolutely fine with me. Like I said, I've been in a massive reading slump for the majority of 2023, so this isn't really an informed list. It's just based on what I've seen other people talk about, what I think stands a good chance, some popular authors, and some that I have just pulled randomly and thought, let's go with them. So I'm going to be splitting this into 3 sections, the first of which is books that I'm quite confident about, and I'm going to go through these in the order of how confident I am, starting with the one I am the absolute most confident with and ending with one that I'm not too sure on. The second section is going to be books that are debuts that I think just sound phenomenal. And then the third section is the more commercial fiction that I'm less sure of, but one of my favourite things about the Women's Prize is that it does often include some of those more commercial, accessible works as well. So I don't actually know too much about most of these books. I'm just going to very briefly talk about them and show you the covers, and I'd love to hear what your predictions are as well. So the first book I'm going to talk about is the one that I am the most confident on, and it is Let Us Descend by Jesmyn Ward. I am so confident that Jesmyn Ward is going to be on this list because she is a phenomenal writer and I hear nothing but amazing things about her books. For a lot of these, I am just going to read you like the blurbs, and from what it says about this book, Let Us Descend is a reimagining of American slavery, beautifully rendered as it is heart-wrenching. Searching, harrowing, replete with transcendent love, the novel is a journey from the rice fields of the Carolinas to the slave markets of New Orleans and into the fearsome heart of a Louisiana sugar plantation. From one of the most singularly brilliant and beloved writers of her generation, this miracle of a novel inscribes Black American grief and joy into the very land, the rich but unforgiving forests, swamps and rivers of the American South. It is Jesmyn Ward's most magnificent novel yet, a masterwork of the ages. And just the way they've talked about that book, it sounds like it's gonna be on there. It has to be, especially if it is Jesmyn Ward's best book so far. I believe she did win it with Sing Unburied Sing a few years ago. Let me just check that. Sing Unburied Sing, which I have here, won the National Book Award and it was also shortlisted for the Women's Prize in 2018. So I think that Jesmyn Ward is a surefire for this long list. The next book I am predicting purely just because of how many people have been talking about it, and I have no basis to talk about this book on because I haven't read the original. But if the Women's Prize for non-fiction is anything to go by, this is kind of a theme at the minute, and that is Julia by Sandra Newman. This is the retelling of 1984 by George Orwell from Julia's point of view, so it puts that feminist spin back on the old classic. I've never read 1984, but is it Wifedom, I think, is the name of the non-fiction book about George Orwell's wife that has just been longlisted for the Women's Prize for non-fiction. So I think this would be a nice little pairing. Like I said, I know nothing about it. I don't know if I have any interest reading it because, as I said, I've never read 1984 and I have a feeling I might want to read that if I'm going to read this one. The next one I'm pretty confident on was a toss-up between a few books, and it could still be a toss-up between a few books, to be quite honest. The Women's Prize normally has at least one book that was also on the Booker Prize, long list or short list, etc. Because those are the exquisite books, you know, it kind of gives you a bit of a taste of what the judges are liking and just what is quality writing at the minute. It's kind of like the Golden Globes and the Oscars. They're two different awards, but you kind of get an idea of what's going to win. There were quite a few books on the Booker longlist that were also eligible for the Women's Prize this year. I went between Pearl and The Study of Obedience, but I ended up with Western Lane by Chetna Maru, purely because this is the one that was shortlisted. It's also the one that I'm most interested in reading myself, so I just plucked for it. This is about a British Indian family where the father coaches his daughters in squash, and it is about sisterhood and parents, and also about grief. Again, I really don't know much about this. The blurb says it is a taut, enthralling first novel about grief, sisterhood, and a young athlete's struggle to transcend herself. An indelible coming-of-age story, Chetna Maru's first novel captures the ordinary and annihilates it with beauty. It is a valentine to innocence, to the closeness of sisterhood, to the strange ways we come to know ourselves and each other. So this is a debut. I've only separated it from the rest of the debuts. I might have another couple of debuts in this section actually, purely because these are the ones I'm very confident about. I do think that that will be on the list, just because of how popular it's been. It's one that I've wanted to read myself, I just haven't got around to it yet. Another one that I haven't read but I've heard so many people talk about, and it has themes of motherhood and mental health and suicide and grief and loss, and those are all things that do quite well at the Women's Prize. I know nothing else about it. I don't think I've seen anyone actually review this themselves yet. I've just seen a lot of people talk about there being a lot of hype around it, and that is Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. This looks at identity, how your life shifts when you become a mother, how difficult it is, and how you can deal or struggle to deal with everything else that is going on around you in the early days of motherhood, and just how everything has really shifted. It sounds brilliant, actually. I'm not a mother myself, so it's not an experience I'm familiar with, but it is very much considered to be one of those experiences of womanhood that I think the prize would honour. I'm now coming to one of the only books that I have read, and I'm really confident that this one will make it, but I don't know if anybody else is confident on it, and maybe I'm just really wrong. But this is one that I think perfectly blends that commercial aspect and readability with some more literary aspects, and I think those more literary aspects is what puts it in this category rather than the commercial ones I'm going to talk about in a little while. And that is Piglet by Lottie Hazel. So this is about a woman named Piglet. She has been nicknamed Cruelly Piglet her entire life because of her relationship with food. She is set to get married in 2 weeks' time. However, her husband gives her a revelation, comes to her with a secret 2 weeks before that wedding, and she must decide whether to go through with this or whether to terminate the engagement, call off the wedding. That decision causes her relationship with food to completely shift, and it's a very uncomfortable exploration of food and binge eating and eating disorders. But what I really loved about this book is it didn't talk about it in a way that was body shaming, fat shaming, anything like that. At least I didn't feel that, and I think that is quite rare. It's an excellent example of food writing, which I know is also quite popular, and it's very readable. I absolutely flew through this. I think the way it's told, this is very tension filled, and it's quite unique in the build-up. It almost feels like it's a crime novel, and it isn't, because you don't know what this revelation that her fiance has made, and that just adds to the tension and all of these questions that Piglet has and that her friends and family are asking throughout the book. So I am quite confident this will be on there. I will be disappointed actually if it's not. Another one I don't know too much about but I've heard loads of people talking about, and that is The Land of Milk and Honey by C. Pam Zhang. This is a kind of dystopian climate fiction novel where the food sources of the world have completely run out and humans are literally subsisting on milk and honey. And in that world, it's also being told by a chef whose resources are very quickly dwindling to nothing. Apparently it's very atmospheric, and I think this has a very good chance of being on there because, again, C. Pam Zhang has been previously long and shortlisted for prizes with her previous book, How Much of These Hills is Gold. This was longlisted for the Booker Prize in 2020. It was also a Barack Obama Book of the Year and a Gwyneth Paltrow Book Club pick. I don't know if it was listed for the Women's Prize. It doesn't say on here. But I think another celebrated author with a new book that people are raving about and is very topical. Climate fiction is really popular at the minute. We had Pod by Lillian Paul on last year's Longlist. One that I hadn't heard of until Ben Reedsgood talked about, but I think would be an excellent choice for the list, and one that I am definitely 100% going to read whether it's listed or not, is The Night Alphabet by Joelle Taylor. Joelle Taylor is a poet. I read her collection Kunto, which was brilliant. I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but I remember I absolutely adored it, which was about gender and sexuality. All I really know about this book is it's about tattoos. This is the blurb. A woman walks into a tattoo parlour, but this is no ordinary woman, and this is Hackney in 2233. Jones's body is covered in tattoos, but she wants to add one final inking to her gallery. A thin line of ink mixed with blood that connects her body art together, creating a unique map. As the two artists set to work, Jones tells them the story behind each tattoo. As Jones is no ordinary woman, these are no ordinary tattoos. Each one represents a doorway to a life Jones fell into, a remembering. Some of these lives were in the past, others in the future. Some are sideways, but each of them connects Jones to the two tattoo artists in some way, though they are unaware of it. It does go on a little bit more, but it does also say it's set across geographies and time spans. Dazzlingly bold and original, a deep investigation into human nature and violence against women. So I am very fascinated by this one. I want a copy of it immediately. My library doesn't have it, so I'm tempted to buy it. It just sounds great. I love my tattoos, as you know, so anything tattoo related. And Joelle Taylor's writing is beautiful, and I'm really excited about this one. I hope that this is on the long list. We're starting to get into some books that I really don't know anything about and just kind of plucked because they sounded interesting. So the first of those is The Middle Daughter by Chika Unegwe. This is another story of family and sisterhood. She's an award-winning author. I don't know anything about her, unfortunately, but she has been compared to Bernadine Evaristo and Tiari Jones. It is about a 17-year-old girl who loses her sister and her father in quick succession, and her life spirals out of control. It's apparently a modern reimagining of the myth of Hades and Persephone within a Nigerian family. What really stood out to me about this is that it's a retelling that isn't overly marketed as such, and it isn't direct retelling, so it's not like Medusa or Clytemnestra or Madeline Miller or any of those books that have come out in the last couple of years. There has been a trend of Greek myth retellings being on long lists. I'm not drawn to those in particular. I don't really have any interest in reading them. This kind of reminds me of Home Fire by Camilla Shamsi in the way that it's told, being loosely based on this myth but told in a very different culture. And that is the kind of myth retelling I really enjoy. So I think that'll get it on the list. Also, I love sisters. I think sisters are a big theme that come up in the Women's Prize, and there's a lot of discourse about the middle sister, the middle daughter, so I'm really fascinated to see what this is like. The next book I have is Night Bloom by Peace Adzo Mehdi, and this is another really celebrated author. I have her first book, His Only Wife. I have yet to read it, but I'm not going to go into too much about what this one is about because, again, I don't really know, but it is about the depiction of class and family in Ghana. African fiction about women is, again, really popular, particularly with the Women's Prize. There will 100% be something on this list about that. I just don't know which of the books it's going to be, but I picked out Night Bloom because I had heard so many good things about Peace Adzo Mehdi. The blurb says that this is a compelling exploration of memory, eye-opening story of life as an African-born woman in the United States. Above all, it's a gripping and beautifully written novel, attesting to the strength of female bonds in the face of societies that would prefer to silence women. Now, does that not sound like something that would 100% be on the Women's Prize? It's about two cousins, I believe, from Ghana who moved to the United States and the different paths that their lives take, how they navigate their education and how they fit into an American society that is quite unwelcoming. We now have 3 debuts that I'm going to talk about. The first of which I've again heard a lot of people put on their list. It doesn't sound necessarily like something I would want to read, but I know a lot of people are really excited about it, and it does come up on a lot of lists about debut authors and the most exciting books by debut authors that are coming out this year, and that is The Storm We Made by Vanessa Chan, which is about a Malayan mother who becomes an unlikely spy for the invading Japanese forces during World War II and the shocking consequences that reign upon her community and her family. Cecily Alcantara's family is in terrible danger. Her 15-year-old son Abel has disappeared and her youngest daughter Jasmine is confined in a basement to prevent being pressed into service at the comfort stations. Her eldest daughter Jujubee, who works at a tea house frequented by drunk Japanese soldiers, becomes angrier by the day. Cecily knows two things: it's all her fault and her family must never learn the truth. It sounds fascinating. It's not something that I would necessarily enjoy, but I've seen a lot of people rave about this, and if it does make it onto the list, then I might give it a go. We then have Acts of Forgiveness by Maura Cheeks. In the stirring, tender-hearted debut about ambition and inheritance, a family grapples with how much of their lineage they're willing to unearth in order to participate in the nation's first federal reparations programme. Every American waits with bated breath to see whether or not the country's first female president will pass the Forgiveness Act. The bill would allow black families to claim up to $175,000 if they can prove they are the descendants of slaves, and for ambitious single mother Willie Revel, the bill could be a long-awaited form of redemption. So this again is about racism, slavery, heritage, the American culture, American politics, and all those kind of things. It's almost like a utopian, dystopian, if that's a thing, an alternative future, perhaps. It also says that there is powerful insight, moving prose. The story asks how history shapes who we become, and to consider the weight of success when it is achieved despite incredible odds, and what leaving behind a legacy truly means. So this sounds really, really good as well, and it's one that, again, I would pick up if it was longlisted. I haven't written down the author for this next one, so bear with me just a second. So the next one I'm going to talk about is A Fire So Wild by Sarah Ruiz Grossman. This is another one that I've picked because of the kind of climate aspect. This is about a wildfire that is creeping towards Berkeley in California, and it ignites attention as characters from all walks of life confront the injustices lying beneath the city's surface. As a wildfire threatens Berkeley, the city's inhabitants are forced to reckon with the cracks in the lives they've built. Abigail, a wealthy homeowner, decides to throw a lavish birthday party in a hillside mansion to raise money for the city's newest affordable housing project and prove to her family she's made something worthwhile of her life. Sunny, a construction worker who sleeps in a van along the bay's shore, is in the running for an apartment, but only if enough funds are raised at the party. As the heat and smoke of the approaching blaze descend upon the town, tensions rise and residents, young and old, haves and have-nots, confront the inequities laid bare and the fragility of building a life in a world on fire. Alternating among a colourful cast of characters, A Fire So Wild is a timely, tautly paced novel that questions why, when everything burns, not everyone is left with scars. Bit of an angle change, my apologies, my camera was full and I've just had to delete a load of footage and old videos because I can't stop talking, apparently. So we are on to the last section, which is the commercial reads. So I have read 2 of these books and have some thoughts that maybe they shouldn't be on this list, but based on other people, I have gone for them, I've voted for them. And then there's 2 that I haven't read but think could stand a good chance. So you might have noticed a distinct lack of Irish fiction on this list, which might surprise you because there has been a lot of hype around Irish fiction over the last few years. It just seems to be everywhere. It dominated the book along list and shortlist and won. And it has done for the last couple of years actually. But I have picked one, don't worry. It's just a more commercial one, I think, and that is The Rachel Incident by Caroline O'Donoghue. I've put this on because I'm hoping it'll be on there so that I can get a head start on the long list, because I will be reading this in March, whether it makes it on or not, because I'll be reading it for the Irish Readathon. This is a brilliantly funny novel about friends, lovers, island and chaos, and a young woman desperately trying to manage all 3. Rachel is a student working in a bookstore when she meets James, and it's love at first sight. Effervescent and insistently heterosexual, James soon invites Rachel to be his roommate, and the two begin a friendship that changes the course of both their lives forever. Together they run riot through the streets of Cork City, trying to maintain a bohemian existence while the threat of the financial crash looms over them. When Rachel falls in love with her married professor, Dr. Fred Byrne, James helps her devise a reading at their local bookstore with the goal that she might seduce him afterwards. But Fred has other desires, so begins a series of secrets and compromises that intertwine the fates of James, Rachel, Fred, and Fred's glamorous, well-connected bourgeoisie wife. Aching with unrequited love, shot through with delicious sparkling humour, the Rachel incident is a triumph. One of those that sounds a bit more commercial, but I've heard amazing things from everyone I've heard talk about this. So I'm hoping it's on there, and then I just get a bit of a head start and can actually get some of the books read. I've also put on there Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. I think this stands a really good chance because R.F. Kuang's writing is phenomenal. I haven't read this one in particular. I have read The Poppy War and I have read Babel, both which are just fantastic, and her skill at writing, her way with words, the fact that she is younger than me, it's astounding. And I don't see why she wouldn't be longlisted for this book, which I've heard nothing but incredible things about. This is about a white woman who steals the manuscript of one of her Asian friends, I guess, when she passes away, and passes it off as her own work, but the work is about Asian history and it looks at who gets to tell whose stories. It reminds me in a lot of ways of Washington Black by Essie Adugian, which was longlisted, I think, for both the Women's Prize and the Booker a few years ago, a book that I absolutely adored, which is about a black boy's work being stolen and passed off by a white slave owner. I just think those themes, again, will crop up in this long list. I think they always do really well, and I've heard, like I said, fantastic things about Yellowface. And then the last two books I'm going to talk about are both books that I read and enjoyed, but don't necessarily see them as being on the long list, but have seen other people talking about them, so maybe I'm wrong. The first of those is Good Material by Dolly Alderton. This is about a breakup and it is told from the man's point of view. It's quite frustrating, very validating, and looks at how he has missed all the signs of their breakup and is really struggling with it, and how life has changed so much, how the dating landscape has changed so much since he was last single. It looks at obsession, it looks at letting go. But I really like how we get the male point of view but written by a woman. I think that's a unique perspective that hasn't been explored too much, and it shows how women feel. I related to this in a lot of ways. I recognised my own breakups in the actions of the main character. He's a failing comedian as well, and he really struggles with that. So it looks at male mediocrity and how they react to that. I thought it was a really interesting read. It's not my favourite Dolly Alderton, but I know this is getting a lot of hype and I've seen other people predict it might be on the long list. So for that reason, I'm chucking it in there. I was running out of books that I knew anything about to talk about here. I have suddenly acquired all three cats. Hello. I think because I've been filming for about 45 minutes at this point, they are starting to miss me. The last book I'm going to talk about then is Talking at Night by Claire Daverley. This is about Rosemary and Will, who in the beginning of this book are teenagers. Something quite traumatic happens to them, and then it follows their life over the course of the next 20 years. It follows the miscommunications and the missed opportunities and just how deep their love for each other really goes as both lovers and best friends. It explores how trauma can really bond you to somebody, but also be disruptive to the true nature of your relationship and the course it's going to take. It looks at guilt and how making up for mistakes in your teen years can have devastating effects throughout your life if you don't forgive yourself and let it go and move on and properly deal with your feelings and emotions. It's a really amazing book. It's one of the best books that I read last year, and it is exactly the kind of book that I enjoy. I thought maybe it was a bit too romancy for the long list, but a lot of people have been talking about this. A lot of people love it, and a lot of people have really, really advocated for this to be on there. So maybe I'm missing something a bit more deep and literary, but also it kind of reminds me of One Day and Normal People, my two favourite types of novels, exploring that long-term relationship. So those are all the books that I'm predicting for the Women's Prize long list. Please do let me know in the comments down below if you think any of these books will be on the long list, or if there are any you think absolutely will not make it. I think they're all eligible. I did check release dates of all or most of them. I don't actually know 100% whether those were UK release dates, etc. So maybe some of these aren't eligible, but I just thought it would be fun anyway. The lighting is now getting a bit wild. The sun is right there, so I'm gonna go. But I would love to discuss this list and what you think is going to be on it in the comments down below. I will also leave the links to my Instagram and my Storygraph and all the good stuff, so you can come and follow me on there and talk to me about books. I'll see you in another video very, very soon. Take care. Bye!